Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Sage Intacct webinar on this lovely October morning. Today, we're going to kind of talk about some development tools and some customization in the system that you can do. Just kind of some beginner stuff just to kind of whet your appetite on some things that you could potentially do in the system so that you can start thinking about those and potentially work on some of that, think about some uses for how you can customize the Intacct system even more to make it even better functionally for you. Matt Purcell on our team is going to be showing us some stuff today. So with that, Matt, I will turn it over to you. Just as a quick reminder, we do have all the lines muted. So if you have any questions throughout this, please feel free to put those in the chat or the question pane, and we'll be monitoring those as we go through the webinar. So with that, Matt, I will turn it over to you and let you get started.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Like Teresa said, today we're kind of dipping into the idea of kind of some of the developer tools in Intacct and kind of when you would use those, why you would use them, some of the options, and just kind of giving like a quick little introduction into what some people view as a complicated world. So hopefully after today, you guys will kind of realize that a lot of this stuff is a little more accessible than you might think, and that there are quite a few benefits to some of these different tools that we can use and set up and different customizations and stuff like that. So with that being said, we can go ahead and jump right in. So the big question is why use developer tools, especially considering I'm sure a lot of people have looked into doing certain things that we've kind of briefly mentioned, like smart rules, smart events, and I'm sure a lot of people just see those and think to themselves, why would I ever want to go down that road and figure out how that works? And so the simple answer that I kind of like to give for why anyone should use developer tools, it's basically for when you want to save time, improve efficiency, or automate certain processes in Intacct. And I know that's kind of a broad definition, meaning generally anyone could benefit from this, but at the end of the day, that is true in my opinion, that there's virtually no business that couldn't benefit from, exploring the different opportunities that come with these different customizations and, how the system can work for you in that idea. And so some of the ways you can do that include customizing and extending Intacct with platform services, which is an application within the system that's it's free and you might not even be aware that you guys are subscribed to it. Others might use that all the time, and we'll go over that a little bit here shortly. And so some of the other ways you can capture business-specific data with custom fields. You can set defined conditions to validate data with smart rules. You can automate different processes in Intacct with smart events that run based on certain conditions. You can automate specific tasks in Intacct with platform triggers, which behave pretty similarly to smart events, but kind of expand your options and kind of make it a little bit easier to do some things that might seem more complex. And then beyond that, there's the developer portal, which is one of my favorite tools available, just because it shows you virtually anything and everything you'd need, gives you plenty of examples, and really helps you kind of get your feet wet as far as the developer tools go. And then all of this kind of leads to what we ultimately plan on talking about a little bit down the road in future webinars, which is harnessing the power of APIs in Intacct, and how you can kind of take those to enhance your own environment and automate different things and streamline communication and all sorts of stuff. So like I said, generally speaking, it's developer tools are to save time, improve efficiency, and just to automate certain things in Intacct. And the main goal is to, make y'all's lives easier in the system and, take those little things away that are annoying to have to do. So pretty much anybody can use developer tools. And over the next few slides, I'll explain some of the different portions of them, some of the different options and how those work. So platform services, some of you guys might see this as customization services, especially if you have been on Intacct for a while. But essentially they're the same general thing. Platform services offers a little bit more functionality. And so this is an application area within Intacct where you'll be spending a lot of time when you're exploring the developer tools. And again, like I said, might not be something you're super familiar with, but as you dive into this kind of realm of this kind of world, you'll be in this menu more than you can even remember. So I just included a screenshot down here. And so this is kind of where you're going to go to find some of the things we talk about today. So things like custom fields, smart rules and events, platform triggers. And then one big thing is the objects section. And so that's going to be where you can create and manage object definitions and their components. And so essentially what that means, and this is kind of important to go over from the get-go, just because a lot of the different customizations and these different, smart events and smart rules, they run based on what the system refers to as an object. So an object is going to be something like an AP bill or a GL journal entry, something like that. And so the reason this is important is because this is where you can go to view that object, and you'll be able to find all the different regular fields, custom fields, smart rules and events, any triggers that are set up, all sorts of information about the object. That's very useful when you're trying to implement some of these different things that we're going to talk about today. So first big thing is custom fields. And so custom fields are one of the easiest ways you can customize Intacct for your specific business needs. And the custom field setup wizard walks you through a 3 to 4 step process where you can choose the object where you want the custom field to appear, define the field type, and choose your deployment options. And so this screenshot on the right side of the screen, it basically just shows the different field data types you can use for custom fields. So a lot of people are familiar with, a text field or a number field. So if you just want a text box there to write a quick note or something like that, you could use text or text area. You can also get into things like a pick list. If you want to have that constant set of variables in your data that somebody can pick from. And so the customization is pretty much entirely up to you guys, whatever fits your business best. So they offer plenty of options. And so to add a new custom field, all you're going to have to do is navigate to platform services or customization services, and then object customization section, and then custom fields, and then add. And so the first step when adding a custom field is choosing your object to extend. And so referring back to the previous slide about objects, this is kind of where it becomes important. And so your object to extend is the object in Intacct that you want to add a custom field to. So an easy example, like I kind of mentioned earlier, would be an AP bill. So if you wanted to have a custom field on an AP bill, this is where you would select that as your object to extend. And then, so next step would be to choose your data type, which I just kind of went over just a bit ago. So you choose your data type, and then next would be your label. And so the label is going to be the field name that will actually appear on the user interface side. So if I was going in Intacct and actually entering an AP bill, this is the label that field would have. And then the field ID, this is what I like to call kind of the behind the scenes field name that Intacct officially uses when it's referring to this field. So with the AP bill example, if you had a custom field just tracking some sort of information about the vendor, for example, then if you wanted to import AP bills later on, the field ID is what you would use on the import template as the header. So that's where that kind of ties in and kind of gives somewhat of an example of what I mean by kind of the behind the scenes aspect that Intacct officially uses. And so then after that, you've got your deployment options. So you can make your field required, hidden, and or inactive, depending on what you're trying to do. And then you can also specify a section where the field appears. whether that be, assuming it's a one tab transaction, then you could choose the section on that main page. Or, if it's something a little bit more complex, like a recurring journal entry that you want a custom field on, you can actually choose like the tab, like the schedule tab for it to appear on. So stuff like that. And so once you have all your data entered and chosen your deployment options and all that, then all you have to do is click save. And then if you go back into whatever object you added that custom field to, so for example, an AP bill, then you could just go into an AP bill and you should see that new custom field appear there. Alrighty, so next big thing is going to be smart rules. And so smart rules are just conditions that generate a warning or error message to a user. These are set to respond to 3 different types of user input: add, set, or delete. And essentially what that means, add means the condition is checked whenever a new record is created. Set means the condition is checked whenever a record is changed. And then delete whenever the condition is checked whenever a record is deleted. And so whenever a user performs one of these actions and it does not meet your defined condition, a warning or error message is received. And so for anyone who's not super familiar with smart rules, from a practical standpoint, these are great for things like data entry validation. So we'll go over the example here to the right in just a second. But basically, to add a smart rule, all you're going to have to do is navigate to Platform Services, and then again, the Object Customization section, and then Smart Rules, and then Add. And so your first step, again, is going to be to choose the object to extend. So in this screenshotted example, they're doing this on the vendor object. And then for choose type, error, or warning, they chose warning. And so the difference between the two is that an error requires a user to go back and change something before proceeding, whereas a warning points out the violation, but allows the user to continue if desired. So again, they're on the vendor object and they're just trying to warn the user based on the warning rule type. And then for the events, you have the option of add, set, or delete, and you can add 1, 2, or all 3 of those. So in this instance, they are just having this run whenever a vendor is added. And so then your condition is going to be the rule that is to be met so that an error or warning message is not sent. So in this condition, they're checking to see if the one-time field on the vendor record returns yes. That would mean that it is a one-time vendor. And so their condition is checking to see if it equals false, so that they can give a warning message to say, you just added a one-time use vendor, deselect the checkbox if this vendor will be used more than once. And so again, since this is a warning rule type, it allows the user to proceed. So if they did want to actually add a one-time vendor, or one-time use vendor, then they could do so. And so if you switch that to an error rule type, then that would not allow a user to create a one-time vendor, and they would have to go back and edit that vendor one-time use checkbox in order to proceed. And so once you define the condition and the error message, then the next steps would be to give it an ID and a description. And this is also where you can edit the status to make it either active or inactive. And so just one final reminder, with a smart rule, a condition is a data validation rule that should not be broken. So if it evaluates to false, aka broken, an error or warning is emitted. So again, like we said in this example, we've got our vendor object trying to warn upon adding anytime the one-time field is checked, then we want to warn the error, or warn the user, sorry, that you're creating a one-time vendor, and if it'll be used more than once, you're going to want to go back and deselect the checkbox. And so then one other thing, like I mentioned, so this example came straight from the developer portal website, just because it was a quick and easy example to show you guys. So I linked it here, so feel free to go in there and look. They have plenty of other smart rule examples for slightly more complex tasks, different stuff like that. So just a great resource to go use to kind of get some ideas or help better understand. All right, so next thing is smart events. And so smart events are triggered when a given event occurs and certain conditions are met. So the setup is similar to a smart rule, but it's important to note that a smart rule is to validate an action in Intacct, whereas a smart event is an event that is triggered based on an action in Intacct. And so the event can be as simple as, sending an email all the way up to something more complex, like sending out an API call to create a new record in Intacct. And so to add a new smart event, you'll just navigate to Platform Services, and then again, the Object Customization section, and then Smart Events, and then Add. And so once again, you'll choose your object to extend. So this again is going to be the object that you're trying to base this smart event on. So something like an AP bill or a GL journal entry, something like that. And so the next step is to choose your action. And so with a smart event, you have some new options here. So one option is email. And so this is going to email a specified recipient when meeting the necessary condition. And so an email is going to be the simplest action because the only outside information that you need is the recipient's address. So, an example of this would be a smart event that kicks off an email to a vendor whenever a bill is marked as urgent. The next option would be HTTP post. And so given the required condition, the HTTP post method requests a web server to accept the data enclosed in the body of the request message. And it requires a destination that's programmed to handle the post. So kind of an easier way to think about this is you're basically telling Intacct to send data out to an external place. So an example would be a smart event that posts bill record numbers to an external app after the bill record number is recorded. And so basically you're just saying if this condition is met, I would like to send this data to this external source. And you can do that assuming the external source is equipped to handle the post. Log is, I think it's new and or going, it's either new or it's going away. I'll have to come back to that one, but it's basically just a way to trigger a smart event, or a smart event to trigger an entry in the audit log for something. And so then the last one would be an API. And so again, after meeting the relevant condition, an Intacct XML API call updates the data in the company. So for example, if the total due on a bill is greater than $5,000, you can set up a smart event API to update the bill description. And all of that is handled kind of internally within the smart rule. So it's not going outside per se, outside the system, which kind of helps with, efficiency and, keeping it kind of simple and contained, that kind of thing. So here in this example on this slide, so as it says, we're going to say the CEO gets an email when a user posts an invoice with a total greater than 10,000. So the condition for that would be you're checking the AR invoice total entered. So that's all that part in the brackets right here is saying, is that you're looking at the AR invoice object and then the total entered field to check to see if it's greater than $10,000. So if that condition is met, then it's going to send an email when the invoice is created. And if that condition is not met, then it will not send out that email. And with the email, you can use different merge fields, similar to how printed document templates or email templates that you guys might have set up in the system already. So you can basically have it dynamically pull certain fields from that AR invoice object to be included in that email, in the body of that email. So lots of customization possible with smart events, and smart rules for that matter. Kind of just depends on what you guys are trying to do specifically with your system. All right, so next thing will be platform triggers. And so platform triggers are a powerful way to automate tasks, and essentially they can automatically make input, output, update, validations, emails, and web service calls in response to data changes. So the thought process is pretty similar to a smart event. A rule or condition is going to be met, and then you define what you want to have happen. So with platform triggers, this can take many forms. So first one would be a validation trigger. And so this is basically just going to ensure data integrity before a record is created, updated, or deleted. And it's going to use a formula to check conditions. And if the formula is valid, it returns an error message and halts the process. Or sorry, if the formula is invalid, it returns an error message and halts the process. So an example of this would be validating a project cost doesn't exceed $10,000 before updating the workflow status. Next would be an update field values trigger. And so this is how you can automatically update fields in the current object or a related object when conditions are met. And so a formula calculates the new field value. And so with this one, an example would be setting payment terms based on whether a D&B number is present. So you can check, if one field is present, and then you can say update this next field accordingly. Next thing is create new record trigger. So this is just going to convert a record from one object into another using a conversion map that defines the field correlations between the two objects. Beyond that, you can do attach related records trigger, which links a related record to the current object when a specific condition is met. You can run triggers on related records. So that would be executing triggers on related objects when conditions are met. So essentially cascading actions to related records. Next thing would be a send email trigger. So kind of similar to what we talked about with the smart event. You send an email based on a preset template once certain conditions are triggered. And this also can pull in those merge fields from the different records to create a customized email message. Create template trigger. Sorry about that. So this is going to basically allow you to generate a document template automatically and insert values into the merge cell or the merge fields. And then last two, again, we have HTTP post and Intacct API triggers. So these are going to behave very similarly to the smart events of the same name. So basically, with an HTTP post, you're sending a one-way message to an external URL whenever the conditions are met. And then the Intacct API trigger executes an API call to the Intacct system using an XML document template. So to add a new platform trigger, you will navigate to platform services and then to objects, and then you'll find your object from the list and click on it. Then you'll click on triggers and then new trigger. So then next step is to choose your trigger type, which I kind of went over, but here in this first screenshot, this kind of shows the different ones you can select. So once you choose that, then you will get into the deployment status, which basically if the trigger is deployed, that means it's active. If that box is unchecked, that means it's inactive. Then trigger activation. So this is basically determining when the trigger will activate. So the options for that are before create, update, or delete, and then after create, update, or delete. And depending on which trigger type you use, that kind of determines which trigger activation methods are available. So for example, if I was trying to do an update field trigger, I can only choose either before create or before update. I can't do after create or after update. And so basically all that's saying is you either want the trigger to be activated before the record is created, updated, or deleted, or after it is officially created, updated, or deleted. So next section is going to be the general properties. And so this is where you can give the trigger a name. You can determine whether you want it to be set based on a specific field change. So, if you wanted to say this field changes, now I want my trigger to set off, you can do that. Then you also have the option to run offline. So then the next section is going to be your trigger type properties. And so it's basically just going to be showing you the record that you are updating, and then gives you the option to select the field that you want to change. So again, going back to my example for the update field value, this is one of those fields that's going to show up. for this trigger type. So I'm basically selecting the field that I want to change based on the trigger. So then towards the end, there's going to be basically it's going to be like a formula section. And so with this, it's kind of like a condition, but the syntax can kind of vary depending on which trigger type you're using. So the two examples I included here on this slide, first we're going to look at the one at the very bottom. And so for this example, this is for a data validation trigger. So this is going to be a pretty basic kind of formula that you can use for this. So in this instance, they want to change the workflow status of a project when the estimated cost of the project exceeds $10,000. So with this, they are checking this project object and then the estimated underscore, well, that says estimated underscore post. I think it's supposed to be the estimated underscore cost field to see if it's greater than or equal to 10,000. And so with that, that's essentially it's a pretty simple way of just saying you're checking that field against a number. So that's kind of a good example I like to use kind of first before we get into kind of something more complex, which would be this middle example. And so with this would be a little bit more of like a let's see, more of like a coding kind of syntax, I guess you could say. So this is just like an if return, else return kind of statement. And so I know this kind of seems intimidating, but I promise there are lots of resources out there, which I'll go over quite a few here shortly, to kind of help with the wording of this, as well as the Intacct has its own built-in debugging functionality as well. So essentially all this example is doing is it's checking to see if the department ID of the employee equals 430. And if so, I want it to return 3. Otherwise, I want it to return the employee location key. So it's kind of formatted in a way that might be intimidating to some, but as you kind of get into it and kind of see some different examples, you can kind of realize that there are a lot of kind of basic outline of formulas that are kind of plug and play. So you could kind of update this if else or if return else return statement and insert your own merge fields and your own kind of if condition and your own return, and still be able to kind of use this example without specifically using the data that they're referencing. So once you have all of your different settings and field options and all that stuff configured for your platform trigger, and you enter your formula, then the next option would be to either to save, or if you want to go ahead and do the debugging option, you can do that as well. And basically the debugging option is it's going to just check your formula against a record that you select in Intacct. So once you click the button, it's going to pop up a little window, and you can choose a record that you want to essentially run the formula on. And it basically just helps you validate your formula to make sure it's pulling the right fields, returning what you want it to, and kind of just giving you an example, kind of look ahead of how the platform trigger should function once you're actually in the user interface. So I know that was probably a lot with platform triggers. We will potentially do a quick product demo on that if we have time at the end. Otherwise, if any of you guys have any questions, again, the developer portal is a great resource, which I will for sure go over that today. And then anything else as far as the conditions and formulas and whatnot for smart rules, smart events, or platform triggers, feel free to reach out to us. And we can definitely help you guys kind of get started and with any questions you may have on those. So like I mentioned, the developer portal is one of my favorite resources out there for most of the stuff I've mentioned today. And most of it is in the developer portal. So I personally use it all the time, but it's especially helpful for, things like examples or overviews, stuff like that, for all things related to Intacct Developer and the different system customizations. So the main things that I really like are the API reference section, which I know we haven't really gotten to APIs too much today, but It kind of basically gives a module or application by application breakdown of different API calls that you can make to and from Intacct. So that's pretty neat for anyone who's kind of looking into getting involved with that and maybe wants to kind of see some examples of, some different API calls, excuse me, that can be made. That's a great place to start looking. There's also a web services overview and kind of how that communication process works, which I would strongly recommend for anyone who kind of just feels lost with the whole web services concept. And if you think all this is a little bit too much without some background info, that would be a great place to start to kind of start to learn the communication process. Then you have platform services or customization services. So that's where you can go for different tips and examples and stuff for smart rules and events, custom fields, platform triggers, all that kind of stuff I talked about today. Then you also have data delivery service information. And last section would be the tools and libraries. And so that's where Intacct is going to offer open source libraries, so SDKs, to help developers interact with Intacct's APIs using various programming languages, and then some other developer tools like Postman or the customization services cheat sheet. So again, like I said, I mostly use this for the API reference at this point because that's most of the stuff that I deal with. But again, it really is a good place for anyone to go, even if you just kind of go look around just to see, some different examples of what's possible. And so with that, I will actually pull that up real quick and show you guys. Let me get zoomed in a little bit. So I'm just here on the Intacct Developer Portal main page, and it's just going to be developer.intacct.com. And so with this, I just kind of wanted to briefly kind of show you guys some of the different examples and stuff that I was talking about. So here, if I click on API reference, this is going to give just kind of a general overview about the API and kind of different, useful notes for this reference guide. But then beyond that, it's going to be broken out basically by application area. So for example, if I wanted to run an API call to update a department. So in Intacct, department is found under company and console. So that's where I'm going to go first. And so once I click that, it just links me to this menu. And so then if I see this department section, so if I click on this, then it's going to take me into the department's kind of API example list. And so this basically kind of outlines the different, you can do a get department object definition, you can get department by ID, query and list, update, create, delete, all sorts of stuff. Kind of gives you a breakdown of what each field means if it's required, the field type or the data type that's expected, and then kind of like an example. So this is just like an example little query for pulling the manager field from the employee ID of this department ID or of this department. And so you can get as deep as you want into this. They have all sorts of resources in here for different things. So like I said, I just went to departments, but I mean, they have plenty of stuff within company and console, and then back in API within the different other applications as well. So then if I head back home, another useful thing with this website is, so if I wanted to find, for example, smart rules specifically, so I can type smart rules in here and search it, and then it's going to bring up my smart rule examples link, so I can, and this is where I pulled that one straight off of here that I mentioned from my PowerPoint, and it's also going to give you some different other examples that you can reference just to kind of see what's possible in the system. And then so last thing in the developer website, I would say would be to go to the tools and libraries. And then in here, you can download this customization services cheat sheet. And this is really useful just for kind of explaining how, smart rules, smart events, and even smart links work. And then some of the different operators and methods and different stuff like that. It's just an easy kind of self-contained cheat sheet for different stuff like this. So I would highly recommend going and checking out both the developer portal and this tools and libraries section specifically. Oops. And let me swap that back over. Alrighty, so last thing I kind of wanted to touch on is using APIs in Intacct. And so for anyone who's not aware, APIs are essentially just chunks of code that tell Intacct to do, read, or send something back. So even if you have no code writing experience, there are lots of tools and helpful resources available that make it accessible for anyone. And so with Intacct, a lot of the formulas for for smart rules and smart events, they're a little more straightforward in terms of the syntax, because it's kind of all contained within Intacct's wording. But then as you kind of get into the platform triggers and different API calls and stuff like that, that's when you kind of run into more of like the JavaScript that kind of setup and that kind of coding that you have to use to evaluate things. And so with that, I just wanted to say that even outside of what Intacct itself offers, and of course we are also always here to help with that, but things like ChatGPT or even just code writing helpers or coding syntax helpers that you can find on Google are just great options for that. YouTube can also be your best friend. And so I say all that just to reiterate the point that it truly should be accessible for everyone, with how many different tools and helpful resources there are out there. And so if anybody ever needs any help, wants to dive into this and just doesn't even know where to start, like I said, the developer portal is a great place, but then also feel free to reach out to us, and we can kind of help point you in the right direction. So yeah, I don't think today we quite have enough time to go into a full-on product demo. So if anybody has any questions about, like I said, setting up any of those smart events or custom fields or smart rules, or platform triggers for that matter, feel free to let us know. And we would be more than happy to help you guys, take a look at your system and see what you guys can do from a customization standpoint and what we can help with. And beyond that, not sure on a current or on an exact date or anything yet, but in the future, we do plan to have a part 2 to this webinar where we can kind of go into a little bit more of the advanced stuff. So if that's something you guys are interested in, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to let us know, because we would love to just know if there's a demand for that, kind of the more the slightly deeper stuff, more advanced stuff, and any ideas you guys have for that as well that you might want to see as an example. Feel free to let us know and we can try to work that in. But beyond that, thank you everyone for your time. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Lori or me directly, or anyone else on our team. Otherwise, thank you again for your time, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt. It looks like you did a good job covering all of that. We don't have any questions that came in. So as he mentioned, if you have anything at all that we can help with, feel free to reach out to our Intacct support at microaccounting.com or any of us individually. We'll be happy to help. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Take care.